All right. Good evening. Good evening. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to the Real Precious Network. We appreciate you guys for being here. Um, another Tuesday, another Adoptee Foster Show where we say the uncomfortable things out loud. And so tonight we're going to be embarking on a topic that I don't believe is talked about a lot. And I wanted to do this topic because we know that those who were in the foster care system, adoptees, we go through trauma, we go through our own just experiences in our own journey throughout being in foster care and being adopted. And we take on these behaviors that we're not even aware, what's going on around us to really know what is going on inside of us. And when I stumbled upon this topic, I said, you know what, it'll be good for us to kind of have, just a little chill session where we learn some things. So we know what to look out for, we know what to call what, and we also know how to combat these behaviors that we may see, and not necessarily combat, but actually work with the foster child or the adoptee, and instead of seeing these behaviors as bad or out of character or not a part of the family ecosystem that you wanted to create for the family. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, Mr. Leon, how are you this evening, sir?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Can't complain at all. Tuesday was a great day. Um, Day full of meetings, and tomorrow's going to be the same. Tomorrow's going to be the same. But like I said, I'm excited for this show just so those who are watching are educated. Those who are watching may have gone through some of a lot of what we're going to talk about this evening. Definitely like, share, and subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when we go live. I posted on Instagram. If you're not following me over there, it's Real Precious Official on my Instagram page. I usually post a post just letting you guys know we're going live. But I'm one person trying to navigate like 7 social medias, child. It's like, wait, I gotta come in here. I gotta, and so if you hit that bell notification, you will know when we go live. But we're here every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, like clockwork. It's very rare that I cancel this show. If anything, I'll cancel the guys show that's on Wednesday. I'm showing up for the community. The guys can wait. The guys can wait. I love y'all, but I think this takes precedence over having that show talk on Wednesday. But every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, we are right here on the Real Precious Network. We are always looking for adoptees and former foster youth to be on the show. So if you're interested in being on the show, you can always email me at the Real Precious, at the Adoptee Foster at gmail.com. You can always email me there, or like I said, go onto my Instagram page and you can DM me on there. All right, so hola, hola, hola. Thank you so much for being here, Coach Chelsea. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think I also saw Fish in the Fit in the crowd as well. Thank you guys so much for being here. Again, definitely like, share, and subscribe, but definitely push these lives out. Again, they're just open discussions on our experiences, others' experiences. We do have other guests who come on to the panel and share their experiences. And as we always say, our experiences are similar, but none of them are the same. I think I've heard every person that has come on the panel have all had their own distinctive story. None of them have been the same. They have been similar, but none of them have been the same. And so we would love to have you on the show just to speak out. We're here as advocates to show others that they can use their voice, because we know that there are big emotions, big feelings, big thoughts that lie dormant in adoptees and former foster youth. And part of healing is being able to name the things that are hurting you, the things that you're not able to talk about, to spread awareness and make other people feel comfortable. So you definitely have a community over here that is willing to go through that with you, because the only way out is through, and we ain't getting out this joint. Okay, so we might as well walk through it together. All right. All right. So again, tonight we're talking about RAD. What is RAD? It is reactive attachment disorder. And reactive attachment disorder is commonly used with those who have been in the foster care system. Reactive attachment disorder is a rare trauma-related condition that can develop in young children who have experienced severe neglect, abuse, repeated caregiver changes, and institutional care, or inconsistent nurturing during early childhood. These early experiences can interfere with the child's inability to form secure, healthy emotional attachments to caregivers. Now, the important thing to note here is that RAD is not caused by adoption itself. So just because someone is adopted does not mean that they will be diagnosed with RAD. RAD is a diagnosis, that is given to children primarily in their early childhood stages. So this is children who are at the age of 5 and under. And so with RAD, there can be a difficulty of trusting or relying on caregivers, limited emotional responsiveness, avoiding comfort even when distressed, withdrawal from social and emotional interactions, and difficulty expressing emotions appropriately. And so just to go a little bit into RAD, when they say severe neglect, it means you almost was left for dead. You're not being fed. You have no one to have an emotional attachment to. You are going from house to house to house to house with no one to really say that, they're in your life in a secure way. And so when they talk about severe detachment, it is literally having no one in your life to actually attach to. And so with RAD, there are certain criteria that you have to meet, or certain testings that they put children through to see if they are diagnosed with this disorder.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is a lack of social approach, when they fail to initiate or respond to social interaction in developmentally appropriate ways. It's unexplained withdrawal, fear, sadness, irritability, failure to smile, frozen watchfulness. Remember when you were like, I would just look out in the window and just be stuck in my teachers, that is part of one of the criteria of RAD. Not seeking comfort or no response when comfort is actually given. So you ever seen someone hug a child and the child just, the arms are just straight down and they're not showing any comfort back to that person?
Mhm.
Their failure to ask for support or help. They will rather just do it on their own. Failure to reach out when being picked up. Again, this is in children of the age of 5 and under. They have no urge to interact with others,
Mhm.
no social interaction, or they're over sociable. And they don't really show selective attachment. So they don't really say, oh, that's my favorite cousin, or that's, I love hanging with my brother. There is no attachment there. And so when you're thinking about RAD, this is and think about like radical, right? It's literally the extreme of having no one. And so you fail to form connections because you don't even know what it looks like. You don't have anyone in your life to actually connect to. And then you start feeling inwardly that you're not worthy of connection, and you're not worthy to be someone that can have a healthy connection with someone else. Have you ever heard of RAD? Because I know when I told you what we were
No,
doing,
that's why I asked you what it was and you didn't respond.
I know because I wanted you to work for the show. But it took all the
I,
fun
look-
out. I would if
I
I would have explained everything.
and I looked it up too, and no, I never heard of it. But it makes sense. You know, I probably went through a lot of that and didn't even realize that what it was. I mean, obviously, I'm talking like I could remember a lot of that stuff when I couldn't.
Right.
No, I never heard of it. Never heard it be mentioned. Um, the first time I heard it is when you actually brought it up.
Yeah. And like I said, I stumbled upon it while looking for content for the channel and things
Hmm.
that we could talk to in the community. And this was one of them. I think the controversial conversation around RAD is that it is literally a diagnosis. It's something that is in pretty much a manual of mental disorders. And neglect is something that happens to the child, right? It's something that the child does not have any control over, yet they get
Hmm.
diagnosed with this mental disorder because of what happened to them. And so a lot of adoptee advocates and those who are in the community are saying, well, why does it have to be a diagnosis, especially with CPTSD, and which is something that was later uh, introduced as, okay, we're going to move this from a diagnosis to a disorder that is not necessarily diagnosed. It's a disorder that has to be managed over time. And
Hmm.
so we're going to get into CPTSD. But guys, if you're just joining, again, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. We're actually going to get into a couple of videos of a woman who breaks it down very perfectly because she educates others on this subject. But sit tight, sit tight. All right, so now we're going to get into complex PTSD. Okay, complex. Sorry, come on now. Come on. All right. Complex PTSD, right? As it relates to former youth and adoptees. So, complex post trauma stress disorder is a trauma related condition that can develop after prolonged or repeated exposure to traumatic events, especially in situations where escape wasn't possible and a person felt powerless or trapped. For former foster youth and adoptees, CPTSD may result from experience such as abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, multiple placements, loss of caregivers, and chronic instability. And so, what to really look for in those who have developed CPTSD is those who have intrusive memories, nightmares, or flashbacks. Anything can take them back to an earlier moment in childhood where they felt neglected, and in that instant, they feel neglected again. Emotional dysregulation, which is intense emotions, difficulty soothing or calming. So they have no tools in their toolbox to actually self soothe or talk themselves off the ledge. There's also negative self belief, shame, guilt, feeling not enough. That is heavy in a heavy symptom in the CPTSD because these thoughts run over and over and over in your head, and if you can't emotionally regulate, then that means you are allowing these thoughts to overtake you. There's difficulty with relationships, trust, and boundaries, hypervigilance, anxiety, and a constant sense of threat. Also, feelings of hopelessness, numbness, or disconnection. And so, what's important to note for CPTSD is that it's not a sign of weakness or a character flaw. It is a natural response to abnormal and traumatic experience. With the right support, stability, and understanding, healing and growth are possible. And so I wanted to put both of those slides up just so we can see what the difference is. And I know in reading it, it doesn't really seem like there's a difference. And the difference really is with CPTSD, you do have a connection. However, something has injured that connection.
Hmm.
So for adoptees, former foster youth, that injury is being relocated or being placed for adoption or the severing of the mother child relationship. And not only does it start there, if you're placed in multiple foster homes, then that it continues to be something that goes with you and it's a part of you because it's something that continues to happen in your life. So you form connections and you're not cold towards these people. You're not showing these people emotions, but at some point in the journey, you know, your emotional stability or your nervous system is disturbed. And so
Hmm.
instead of saying you have a reactive, you know, attachment disorder, it's you have a complex post traumatic stress disorder, because after this threat or after this injury, you are now dealing with a complex wave of thoughts, emotions that stems from trauma. So I hope that everyone is understanding the difference between the two. How did I
No, that sounds about, right. And these can only be diagnosed. These aren't something you can give somebody and say, how they do. You know how everybody be on the internet talking about, oh, you're a narcissist, and like
Mhm.
you can't diagnose somebody if you're not a doctor, if you haven't observed them over a period of time. And that's really what this
Right.
is. It's a period of time where because when they do the home studies, they they watch your every movement. They watch when people come into the room and they jot down, um, you know, how you react. Are you nervous? When a certain person comes into the room, do you feel comfortable? Do you actually, do you push back from that person emotionally? It's a lot that goes into these home studies. I
Yeah.
think people don't really realize, like, and when these caseworkers are observed. I actually have a friend, she's a caseworker. I want to see if she can come up one day.
Come on now.
Um, and it actually the reports of what they observe is how you actually get diagnosed, and
Hmm.
not somebody, like, I hate to say it like this, but off the street,
Right.
saying, "Oh, you got, you're a narcissist," or like, you can't do that. And these diagnoses, they take time, and they take really a lot of evaluations in certain situations.
Yeah, so RAD is the only condition where you can be diagnosed by a psychologist. You know, CPTSD is something that it evolved into where, you know, professionals were saying, well, this happened to them, and so we're not going to diagnose them and make them feel like something is wrong with them.
Hmm.
Also, RAD is actually observed for 12 months. So if the conditions of RAD, of not showing affection, not reaching out for help, not connecting to anyone, if those symptoms show up for 12 months, that's when you're diagnosed. So this is like you said, an extensive process where you are being observed by those who are included in that work study. Whereas CPTSD is something that is, you know, you can have that from five to the rest of your life, really.
Hmm.
So, there's a, small clear distinction between the two, but like you said, you're absolutely right that it's something that has to be diagnosed by a professional. And again, it's why it's controversial in our community, because it's like you're diagnosing us and you're making us seem like the cause of why we're acting the way that we're acting is because something is wrong with us. Now,
Hmm.
does it give you mental disorders? Can you get mental disorders because of neglect and abuse and things of that nature? Yes, but you shouldn't be diagnosed and then, put on medicines that can then take you even further out of, from reality.
Hmm.
Huge medicine person. Like, we're the all natural. We're the herbs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because Pharma USA will treat one thing and another thing will suffer because you're getting treated for
Hmm.
one thing. And
Exactly.
so, why are we doing that instead of finding ways to actually help a child to connect? And it may seem like a impossible feat. It may seem like a huge mountain that you have to climb. However, the alternative are these children growing up in an environment where they feel like they have no support and becoming a statistic. So I wanted to show this video. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Coach Chelsea. Girl, I was just making sure I was getting the distinctions correct. I appreciate you, Rainey. Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to get into a video, and it serves as a dual purpose in this show, and we're just going to take a little excerpt of one of the purposes and kind of talk about that a little bit. But I wanted to show this video, and based upon what we have seen of the definitions of reaction attention attachment disorder, excuse me,
Hmm.
and complex PTSD. Which do you think this gentleman in this video identifies most with?
My therapy sessions a lot stem from my adoption. They stem from I don't belong, like you just said. I had no full connections to things. I didn't either.
Yeah.
When I grew up and I realized I'm not blood,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm an outsider.
Yeah.
I'm alone. I don't belong. And a lot of times I'm in therapy, my therapist will circle almost the same words.
Did you feel expendable?
I felt like, I mean, and even you'd mentioned like some of the things that like people would say to you. My sister, my parents' daughter, at one point said when I was getting ready to look for my biological parents, she sent me an email and said, go back to the trash of the family you belong with. You don't deserve our last name.
Oh my God.
Horrible, horrible.
And
What?
That was his sister, adopted sister, who said that to him when he went to go look for his biological family. Golly.
when you fought your whole life to try and belong,
Yeah.
and then somebody in your family tells you you don't belong. And then I learned too that my grandmother would often refer to me as, well, he's the adopted one.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
And I didn't know that until my cousin would always call me. And he would always say, we'd have the same conversation. He's like, well, grandma always called you the adopted one. And so I've struggled with like belonging.
Yeah.
All right. So, based upon the definitions, which one would he classify with the most?
Probably the RAD. Um, I mean, at some point, I think, now this is just a general statement, but I think at some point, we as adoptees, some carry the RAD at the beginning, but over time, you can, and it depends on, how people treat you too, where you're at too, like in your adopted family. So, like, if they don't say stupid things like, oh, hey, adopted one, like, like those words, and I say words have meaning. I say this all the time. Um, and when you use them in that context, like they're not being sensitive to your situation. Like, and you know, he, and I think in some aspect, we all feel, I know I do feel disconnected at times from people, and it's not that you don't belong, it's just that you don't have that connection. Like when I was telling you about people that I grew up around that had, like my one friend, they got like 10 siblings,
Mhm.
and their relationship was different than what I had with my brother, and so I was longing for that,
Mhm.
you know, and I think the guy in the video is like the same way. He's just longing for someone not to look at him like, "Oh, you're adopted." You know how when somebody's talking, but and then they say, "But," everything they said before that don't count because you said "but."
Right.
So I think, yeah, he is definitely have some rat in him. Um, what about you?
So I would say it's actually CPTSD. And Coach Chelsea says, sounds like the second one to me, but could be a mix of both. And I'll play the video back just so you can hear why I think it's CPTSD. Because again, with Red, there are no connections whatsoever. But it sounds like in this video, he was adopted. Yes, he was adopted, but I don't believe he knew he was adopted. And then he found out that he was adopted, and then it changed, his whole
Mm,
sense of
okay.
belonging, right? So
Hmm.
we're gonna listen to it back, and we'll see where the injury took place.
My therapy sessions a lot stem from my adoption. They stem from I don't belong, like you just said. I had no full connections to things. I didn't either.
Yeah.
When I grew up and I realized I'm not blood,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I'm an outsider.
Yeah.
I'm alone. I don't belong. And a lot of times I'm in therapy, my therapist will circle almost the same words.
Did you feel expendable?
I felt like, and even you'd mentioned like some of the things that like people would say to you. My sister, my parents' daughter, at one point said when I was getting ready to look for my biological parents, she sent me an email and said, "Go back to the trash of the family you belong with. You don't deserve our last name."
So that's definitely point of injury, right? So this
I
this is
say.
a sister who sounds like she's a biological child of his parents, and he was
Hmm.
adopted. Who says, "Go back to the trash. You don't deserve our last name." At some point, he had to have some type of relationship with her. Um, Even with his adoptive parents, there has to be some type of attachment there. However, the injury comes in when you have a sister who tells you that, or especially when you're trying to find your biological family because you're trying to find the other half of yourself, essentially.
Hmm.
So, that's a point of entry. His grandmother calling him the adopted one is another.
Oh my God. And when you fought your whole life to try and belong, and then somebody in your family tells you,
So, and that's another reason why I think it's complex PTSD as well, because he said he tried. Someone who has RAD doesn't even try. Or someone who's diagnosed with RAD doesn't try to even have a relationship with you. They have no emotional um, bandwidth to even want to have a relationship with someone else. And so that's another reason why I say it's CPTSD, because, he's trying, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have the full connections of biological history and roots. And then
Hmm.
being inside of his adoptive family, even while trying to have a relationship with them, it continues to show up in his face how the feelings of belonging are just becoming stronger and stronger.
you don't belong. And then I learned too that my grandmother would often refer to me as, well, he's the adopted one.
so sorry.
I didn't know that until my cousin would always call me. He would always say, we'd have the same conversation. He's like, well, you know, grandma always called you the adopted one. And so I've struggled with like belonging.
Yeah.
So he has something where he could belong, but there's a struggle there. And I think that that's what complex post-traumatic stress disorder is. It's like there's something there, but there's a blockage. And there's many people who try to remove the blockage. There's people who will ignore the blockage. They're avoidant, attachment. There are those who will talk around it, won't address the elephant in the room. Those are the people who will go along to get along. Status quo, nothing's wrong. You are adopted. You are taken care of. You're fine. We're not going to address those negative. That's a part of neglect for an adoptee. So just because you're not leaving them outside in the cold to fend for themselves and to find their own food and to find their own shelter and to find their own clothes, and you're providing those things for an adoptee, doesn't mean that when you don't address the elephant in the room that you're not emotionally neglecting them, which can turn into abuse if it continues to happen over time. It becomes a pattern that the adoptee notices in their adoptive family that says, when I'm in distress or when I feel the negative feelings towards adoption arising in me, that there's not going to be any emotional safety, or there's not going to be any love that I can actually rest in. I'm going to have to, try to prove myself, or I'm going to have to avoid it like you do, or I'm going to have to just live with it and suppress it because the blockage is not going anywhere.
Yeah,
So,
and I was gonna say, depending on how old his sister was, like far as age gap, maybe, you know, I think sometimes, some of the siblings may get jealous of the time that is taken away from them because of, um,
the
when
special.
when when you are adopted and you come out of a situation that is not favorable to you, you need that extra care.
Yeah.
But some people don't realize that, and you know I don't know if parents actually explain that in detail about like what happened and why. But I think there is some could be some form of jealousy, or for the lack of I'm not saying that like they don't get attention, but I think that they do maybe harbor some kind of, you know.
Yeah, because so when you have a biological child and you have an adopted child, they're not starting at the same place,
Hmm.
right? So that's why it's so important for adopted parents to be trauma informed, because the trauma that they experience bringing a biological child in the world, a mother, let's just say a mother, right? She's
Hmm.
experiencing a physical trauma of her body, in which in most cases you're able to bounce back, right? As long as you do what the doctor says and clean yourself correctly and all that good
Hmm.
stuff. And, your C-sections, you got to stay off your feet. You got to, follow the directions. As long as you do all those things, you can bounce back from that trauma.
Hmm.
And a lot of mothers even forget the pain of childbirth after they have children, especially if you're not continuing to have kids. I'm joking, you're going to know. But, so that trauma is something that happens in time and goes away, right? When you
Hmm.
when you adopt a child, even if you're adopting them at birth and you think that you're getting a blank slate baby and you think that this baby is not going to experience any trauma from the act of adoption, um, that is false, right? Because the adoption and trauma, like we always say, is cellular is something that lives within, and it's something that does not have a language. It happens to you before we even have a language for it. And so being informed about that prior to adopting would help your cognition and your cognitive skills when dealing with both children, because again, children don't experience their parents in the same way. And so an adopted child is definitely not going to experience the parent in the same way as a biological child. And so you're just not dealing with the same level. You're not coming in at the same entry level.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're dealing with a child who has experienced trauma, then it is going to take more of you thinking outside the box. It's going to take more of attention. It's going to take more of stretching yourself. I mean, as a parent, you're already being stretched. But imagine adopting a child that you didn't biologically have. You're going to have to learn that child and learn the trauma uh, triggers within that child. And that only comes from being observant, being hands-on. There, uh, unfortunately, the adoption agencies can forewarn you, but they cannot give you everything that you need
Mm-hmm.
to succeed as an adoptive parent. This is
Mm-hmm.
something that is going to be a lifelong journey in which you're going to have to make the investment of that emotional stability for you and the child. It's not even just for the child, because you can be burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the tools on how to actually um, get through these hard times and get through these hard emotions. You can have a burnout, and then you'll say to yourself, what is wrong with this child? And it's not what's wrong with the child, it's what happened to this child that is making them, not want to be comforted, not want to connect, not want to, ask for help. Like those are things where you have to dig a little bit deeper than looking at the child and saying, "Oh, well, their bad behavior has put them in this place, and I refuse to deal with that." No,
Mm-hmm.
because to us, we're all in the back of our minds. We're always saying, "You chose this." Right? So when you choose not to deal with something, in the back of our minds, we're always thinking, but you chose this. So which part are you not choosing now? You know what I mean? It's like, which part are you not choosing to deal with when you were the aggressor in this situation? uh,
Exactly.
so that's what we think of as adoptees. And a lot of times as adoptees and those former youth, we observe you more than we listen to what you say, right? Someone doesn't have to tell you that they don't want to talk to you. They can just not talk to you. So you observe that, and you don't always, a lot of people want the closure, and they want someone to tell them what they're thinking, or, what they think is the issue. And sometimes you can just observe someone's actions and tell. But like I said before, adoption is so wrapped in emotion that trying to avoid it, to me, is the most idiotic thing you could do.
Yeah, that's probably the worst thing you could actually do is, like I said before, they're giving the playbook.
Mhm.
They're the quarterback,
Yeah.
and they're not reading the playbook. They're not trying to understand. They're not trying to. I'm not gonna say everyone, but you
Right.
know, like some of the parents don't try to understand. Like I was saying before, like if you like to be hugged, then they're not a hugger. Like they didn't grow up that way. Um, I told the story when I met my dad in person, and he wanted to shake my hand, and it kind of threw me off because I didn't grow up that way. Like I grew up, you know, in a loving um, family that actually um, hugged and said that I love you, on a consistent basis. So it wasn't, you know, yeah, it was kind of off-putting, but that was his boundary, right? Like, so I had to respect that. He didn't want to hug. I shook his hand. That was good enough for me. But there are people, who don't really understand the dynamics of, like, when you adopt somebody, you really have to read into, what they experience, and, try to figure out. I'm not saying you're going to solve the problem, but you can at least try to help alleviate some of that, trauma that they experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only going to make the connection stronger, even if
Hmm.
it hurts doing it, right?
Hmm.
Like we talk about this all the time. You don't go to the gym to feel, like you walking on clouds, because when you leave there, you feel like you walking on rocks. Your body hurts, it aches. You are training those muscles. You are
Hmm.
sculpting those muscles, you're eating right, you're doing all the things that's going to train your body to look the way that you want it. And it's funny that a lot of adoptive parents, and of course some, not all, but a lot of adoptive parents go in with this narrative of the way that they want it to look. Well, if you want to look a certain way in the gym, you got to work at it. And it's the same way with parenting in general, not just
Hmm.
adopted children, but adoptees do need a special kind of care because they have a unique story. They just do. And we don't want to have these special needs, but we do. It's like adoption is not a handicap, but it does come
Hmm.
with special needs. It does require special care. And,
Hmm.
that's why I always say that if two people are going into adoption and one person says no, leave it at no, because that's a make or break, you know, decision if a child is going to connect with you. I think if someone knows in their heart that they can't care for a child the way that they need to be cared for, coming from these circumstances, that they should be 100% honest with themselves and the person that desperately wants to have children, to either wait till the time is right and you get to a place where you have done that inner work, or
Hmm.
put it to rest, because the child will be able to figure out who's who in the scenario. Coach Chelsea says you constantly hear children are resilient, which is true, but it seems those who are adopted shouldn't be thrown into thinking the child will adapt and they'll be happy just because they are adopted. Yeah, it's we're definitely thrown in the they be all right. Like, well, they'll be all right, they'll be all right. And it's like, we will be, that's a true statement. We will be all right. But what does that road to all right looks like? Like, what does that really look like for an adoptee who doesn't have the proper emotional support that they need?
Hmm.
They're going to seek it elsewhere. They're going to self-harm. They're going to, have these inward thoughts about how they're not good enough, how they're not worthy. They're going to be forever searching for somewhere to belong or someone to belong to. And, you shouldn't be searching for that your entire life. Like, again, there should be people in your life that you're able to rest in their love and not
Hmm.
warm for their love. And a lot of adoptees, till this day, again, if you can't be honest about your genuine feelings towards your adoption journey, because it is a journey, with your adoptive parents, then in a way you're performing, because a performer has to put on a smile. They have to read a script. They got to do the dance. They got to tap 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 here and there, right? But they can't necessarily be honest about what they're experiencing in their journey. It's almost like, that we can't even have a normal conversation, because I feel like the simple words that are going to come out of my mouth might be offended, it might hurt your feelings, and then it's gonna mess up the whole vibe. And then, like, you know what I mean? Nobody wants to be that person. And so they choose not to be. And they don't say those uncomfortable things out loud. And it shows up somewhere else in their life. It may not show up directly inside of their family unit, because they don't want to be the person who disturbs that family ecosystem, but it shows up somewhere else in their life. And so in order to be free of those things, it is healthy to have those conversations, but you have to identify these things within yourself first. I always say be real with yourself so you can be real with others. So if you know that you don't have this support system, and you know you don't have people that you can talk to about this, and we always want the people who are closest to us to support us, but that's not always going to be the case. And I think adoptees realize that a lot sooner than later, that the people that you want to root for you are not going to be the people that you think are going to root for you, especially when you start opening your mouth about the uncomfortable things about adoption. It's not that you're ungrateful. It's not that you don't appreciate your parents. It's just that there are certain things that deserve conversations. And if we avoid those conversations, then we avoid connection.
Yeah, and I think it's still um for some families it's still a taboo subject, right? They treat it like, is a subject that, like, they didn't pursue, They pursued this.
Yeah.
They are the ones, like you say, they were the aggressors, they were the ones who, no matter what your situation is, if they didn't have any kids or if they already had a kid and they wanted, more kids, you know, and if you're going to be the aggressor, you need to do all the work, and that's everyday hands-on work.
Yeah. And it's not that, you're not doing it by yourself. See, when it's a parent-child dynamic, and we look to our parents to initiate those conversations, and to do that work that you're talking about, this is a team sport here. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think that adoptees are looking for adoptive parents to be perfect. I think it is a co-relationship where I work with you, you work with me, I work with you, you work with me, but it has to be a consistent kind of action. It has to be something that the adoptee can rely on, and that may take time and patience. I there are connections that happen right away, and then there are connections that take time. And I think
Hmm.
that the more you lean into the trauma informed behaviors, the more you lean into the actual child that you adopted, where you can tap into it, the more you lean into it, you can tap into it quicker. The longer you avoid it, the longer you're going to continue to say, this is a difficult child. I like, we just don't connect. And you can't blame that on the adoptee. You have to take some type of accountability within that. And within that being said, we're going to get into a couple of clips from, again, she is a content creator on TikTok. Her name is Kelly on TikTok. Her is Tinker Kalita. But she is on TikTok, and she educates about CPTSD, as well as attachment disorders, narcissism, family dynamics. And someone had commented on one of her posts, and Brian here says trauma is injury, not illness. Someone with trauma has been mentally injured by someone or something. Acknowledging this compels accountability. And so trauma, like any such responsibility bearing relationship, must be defined out of existence by any extractive system. And so we're going to hear what Kelly has to say to this comment that someone posted on her page.
This comment is quite possibly one of the top 3 best comments I've ever received in the history of my account. We're going to unpack the 3 parts of the comment, starting with trauma is injury, not illness. This line alone dismantles so much bad faith discourse, because illness implies something went wrong inside of you. Injury names an external force that caused that harm.
So I'm going to stop it right there. So again, that's the difference between RAD and CPTSD. RAD is a diagnosis that they put upon children who are ages 5 or below, and pretty much a diagnosis makes it seem like there is something wrong inside of you because you are having these mental breakdowns and not being able to attach to anyone. And she explains CPTSD as well.
And the moment you call it injury, changes everything. Because if trauma is an injury, we're no longer asking, well, what's wrong with you? We're asking the uncomfortable questions. What happened? What didn't happen? Who failed to protect you? And who benefited from it being ignored, dismissed, minimized, or gaslit away? Now, this part of the comment, acknowledging this compels accountability. Exactly. Because injury demands response. It demands repair and accountability.
Just like the video of the guy who talked about his family.
Mhm.
Injury needs response. Like, okay, now we're gonna have to sit and talk about this because where did this comment come from, right?
And accountability is expensive, emotionally, socially, institutionally. So then it must be defined out of existence by any extractive system. This is the quiet brilliance of the comment. It's the part you can't see at the end. Because if trauma is acknowledged as injury, families might owe accountability. Abusers lose moral cover. Institutions might have to change.
Ding, 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 ding.
And systems might actually have to repair instead of pathologize and externalize blame.
So the system is saying, I'm going to diagnose you with RAD because you were neglected. That has to change.
So what do extractive systems do instead? They individualize it, medicalize it. They turn that injury into a disorder. Your reaction becomes the problem. Your distress becomes inconvenient, and suddenly you're the thing that needs fixing, not the system or the person that harmed you in the first place.
Let the church say amen.
Sound familiar? And people with complex PTSD are told, just grow beyond it, try harder, think differently, move on, be positive. That is not healing language, that's relational gaslighting. Because injury asks for justice, illness asks for compliance. And too many of us were conditioned quietly, repeatedly, to swap those words without our consent. That's why this comment matters a lot.
Yeah, I mean, injury doesn't actually have to be like physical, right? Like you
Right.
don't have to necessarily be physically abused to actually be injured. You can be emotionally injured.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, like you were talking about earlier, with all of the different symptoms of pushback and insecurity. And, those are things that, like she said in the video, are caused by someone else. And what the cause is the effect of that cause is what you're doing, or is it the symptoms that you're displaying? It's not like that would be like if your internet goes out. God, hope it don't go out right now.
Come on now.
But what I'm saying is, what was the cause of that? Like, so, and that's when you begin to troubleshoot. You're like, okay, well, let me go look at the router, see if the power is on, see if it's lit up. Is there bad storm outside, or did a tree fall or something? So there are steps that can be taken to figure out the cause, and I think a lot of people don't look at the causes of the symptoms that you're displaying.
Yeah. And if they do, there is no urgency to get any type of assistance or help or
Mhm.
support with it.
Mhm.
It's you because like you said, it's you guys are given the script. You're given all these identifiable behaviors about who I am as a child before you even ask me to call you mom and dad, right? You're given these things. And so I'm sure in that script, especially for me, you know what I mean? I went through a couple homes before I was adopted. It had to be some identifiable things in there, a behavior pattern, and maybe there wasn't because again, when I don't know when I was different when I was in my last foster care home than I was when I was adopted. So I don't know what was written in there. However, there has to be some things that are identified in the paperwork that tells you a behavior pattern of the child.
Mhm.
Unless you are days old, weeks old, sometimes even months old, depending on what the observation is on the child, if they're, was part of the system or if they were family. But
Mhm.
for some, there is already a history
Mhm.
prepared for the adopted parents. And so, there has to be we like to prevent things before we have to repair them, right? I use that in every day with my job. Like you want
Mhm.
to be preventative before you have to really spend money to make major repairs. And I think that in adoption, we have to be able to see what the signs are or name them and claim them because it can be bad behavior to you, but to a child psychologist who's looking at it, they're like, okay, this isn't bad behavior. This is actually normal behavior due to the fact that they've been neglected. They've gone from home to home to home. These are the things that you need to do to ensure that there's connectivity, to ensure that there's closeness, to ensure that there's communication. They will give you a different perspective that allows you to have a certain amount of patience, that allows you, because parents get tired, they going throughout day to day to day to day to day, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day we have to keep things in perspective and keep reality at the forefront. And reality says that you have a child that may display behaviors that you're not ready for, behaviors that you're not educated about, behaviors that you haven't seen in the children in your family over the years, And when you're exposed to something foreign, it is important to educate yourself on it. And it's not a weakness. It's not, oh, why do I have to do that?
Mhm.
It shouldn't be seen as extra work. It should be seen as I chose this and I am up for the journey.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I was looking at my paperwork that they sent, and it was a note in there, and they said, the mother, um, that was when I went to my first adopted home, she admitted that you know there were behaviors that I displayed, that she quite couldn't handle,
Mm,
and she admitted that it wasn't my fault. It was her fault because she couldn't figure out, or she just was not ready for that type of um,
commitment.
dynamic or commitment to those types of behaviors. And so I think hats off to her for recognizing that, because like um, it was a blessing in disguise, because I was sent to a place where they were able to give me what I needed,
Mhm.
and that's really what's important.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Z-Man Entertainment says, if you and Leon didn't say you were adopted, I wouldn't have put that label on you. The two of you are just as normal as any individual. Well, it took a lot of Jesus to get here.
Amen. Mm.
Ah man, we got to pull from a source, okay? Because sometimes it can get lonely. It can get lonely. No, no, you just when you become a certain age, you're able to put things in a perspective where there is no blame game. There is
Mhm.
no, we don't want to come off as like we're putting adoptive parents down or foster parents down. It's about awareness. There are
Mhm.
a lot of things that everyone in this world, every individual does that is an unconscious behavior or an unconscious response. And when someone calls it out or speaks on it, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person for unconsciously not being able to recognize your behavior.
Mhm.
However, when it is called out, there should be some sense of accountability or looking within and saying, okay, what can I do better? Because the journey is not over. Like you are uncovering things every single day in your journey as of late, as of today, right? And so the journey never ends. And so there is no I failed. It's only I can only get better from here, right? Like you don't. I don't think. I think you fail when you don't even attempt to try. And so I don't think that adoptive parents or foster parents should feel bad when they hear these things, or even feel bad when they see themselves as a people who may experience these things. I think it should be more of an eagerness of how can I get better, because adoptees have to do that. It's like, okay, this need is not being met, but how do I be better as a person, right? I don't
Mhm.
I don't know the answers. I don't know who my biological mother is. I don't know who my biological father is. It hurts me dearly, but how can I show up today in the world so the world don't know that I'm hurting inside, like, right? So we are expected to adapt. That is just point blank period. It's what we have learned before we probably loved our adoptive parents. We had to adapt to them first. We had to adapt to the environment. We had to. So honestly, I feel like we can go anywhere, especially if you gotten the help and you have been able to be honest about your emotions. You can go anywhere and fit in. Like I can go anywhere and fit in
Mhm.
because I'm gonna observe who are there. Let me see I'm going to be able to know who I can have a conversation with and who I can't. I know
Mhm.
who I'll be able to let, but I really don't discriminate against anyone because everyone has a story. And being someone who is adopted, who has experienced so many things in my life as far as my adoption foster care story, I have no room to judge anyone, look down on anyone, talk bad about anyone, because we are all going through the journey as we go. It's about being better and not letting your past make you bitter. And I think that a lot of adoptees do come out on that side rather than the bitter side.
Yeah, I think, and as you get older, and I really believe this. When you experience life, you go through things, ups and downs, and in 2001, when I started looking for my parents, I was definitely in a different headspace then.
Yeah.
And now, when I look back, I'm actually thankful that I met them when I did, because I didn't know that they would pass away, within 10 years of each other. So, um, it's really just looking at, you know, like you said, how can you be better? How can you not be bitter towards the situation that you come from, and try to mend and meet whoever you can along the way, because everybody's not going to respond. They're just gonna let that message sit there for 20 years, and but you can't worry about that. Like, you have to accept the people that are actually willing to communicate with you. And I think that just comes with time and learning, how to navigate.
Yeah. It does. It comes with time, maturity, patience, a
Mhm.
support group, exploring yourself for yourself,
Mhm.
and getting to a point where you're comfortable with doing that, because a lot of people just aren't. They're not comfortable exploring who they are wholeheartedly. And I think it holds them back from even expressing that truth.
Mhm.
So we talked about what both disorders are: RAD, being a reactive attachment disorder, and then complex PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. And so we also know the difference between the two. Had a video from a woman who broke it down ever so perfectly, because she is an educator of these disorders and she advocates for those who experience them, going through them, and other dynamics in family. Now that we know the difference between the two, have identified it, we definitely want to give tips and ways that you can assist your adoptee who experience complex post-traumatic disorder, because again, this is a journey. So there is no okay, in 6 months you'll be healed. It's not like that. Nor is healing linear. Healing is not a straight line. Healing means I'm
Mhm.
okay today, I'm not tomorrow. In 2 weeks I might be all right. In 3 weeks the world might be falling at my feet, right? And so you have to find ways to be able to manage, the symptoms of these disorders, and as well as, live a fulfilled life. However, this does start with adoptive parents becoming a safe and predictable adult. So, children experience trauma and they often have adults who leave, they're rejected, they hurt them. And so, children definitely need a predictable, safe adult, someone who's going to keep their promises, someone who's going to maintain consistent routines, give advice, and
Mhm.
notice the changes, right? Because a lot of children would be like, you didn't even notice when I was doing this, or you didn't even react when I, didn't do X, Y, and Z. And the parents are like, or maybe they noticed it and they didn't think too much to react. And so, a child who has experienced trauma often watches what you do. They watch what you do more than what you say. And so I saw somewhere that co-regulation is better than individual regulation, meaning you have to show it before you want your child to show it to you. Because if you want your child's emotions to be
Excuse
under
me.
control, you have to demonstrate that to them, meaning you're not saying, what's wrong with this child? What happened to this child? Why can't you get it right? No, you get on their
Mhm.
level. You have a certain tone. I know that when I'm with my sister, and my niece is acting a little out of pocket, you know what I mean? It's not about yelling at her, it's not about screaming at her. I get down on her level and I start to talk to her and use tones where she'll feel calm and she doesn't think that I'm correcting her, because I'm using compassion and I'm asking her if she understands and I'm holding her hand, and I'm still being loving, but I'm also not giving anger with anger or giving frustration with frustration. And it's something that takes practice. It's not something that you're going to get all the time. Again, we know that parents are working, we know that parents are busy and have things going on, may have multiple children, but at the end of the day, you have to practice these things in order to become good at them. And so being able to look beyond the behavior of the child helps, the child actually become attached to you, because now you're trying to understand them, right? There may be children who may lie because they don't want to be on punishment. There are children who may, this used to be me. I remember when I was younger, I used to go to that snack cabinet and get the cookies off that top shelf. I used to get in trouble, but I wanted some cookies. Okay, that's why now I couldn't leave them cookies in there. um, but you form these behaviors because of things that happened to you in the past. So it was like, let me get these cookies because I don't know if I'm gonna get cookies, and then be on punishment and don't even get no cookies. Like, so look at the behaviors. Don't judge the child's behaviors based upon them being a bad child or a child that won't listen. There's definitely reasons, right? And because of that, you have to build connection before correction. You have to build connection before correction. Children heal through relationships. They don't necessarily always heal from saying, you got to do this because I said so. And if you don't do this, you're going to get in trouble. And if you go there, no, you have to build the connection before the correction. So correct first and then help them regulate their emotions, right? Like I was saying with my niece, it's like, okay, I'm going to correct first, but I'm also going to use those sweet tones, still firm tones, but inflection in my voice so she knows I'm not angry and just using one, or hollering or yelling. Correct the behavior, after they're calm, and simply letting them know, I'm here, you're safe, we're going to get through this together. I'm not going anywhere. This helps you learn their triggers. Once you learn their triggers, you'll know, are they raising their voice? Are they, being left alone and not wanting to connect? Are holidays hard? Are birthdays hard? Is talking about their biological family something that makes you uncomfortable? Do they now feel rejected because you don't want to explore that side of them? These are all triggers that will erupt that behavior, and you have to take a step back and say, okay, what am I observing here? What is coming up? And when you don't know, ask the question, hey, can we go to the side and talk really quick? Have a quick conversation with you. And so understanding those behaviors help a lot too. And that's why we always encourage adoptive parents to be trauma informed, right? Talk to a child psychologist, talk to a licensed professional who can say, maybe you should go about this in a different way. Maybe you should consider, their trauma, consider what they have been through, and then, work through this in a different manner.
Yeah, because the tone, like, I agree. The tone is very important. Or, like, even when you're not in trouble, like, you have to be a creative, progressive thinker when you are, um, when you're an adopted parent, because especially, like, I can only speak for my situation and reading about a lot of the things that I went through, and they basically was saying they didn't know if I was going to be able to walk or talk. So from going from that, and being on a platform talking, that just shows you
Look at God.
how good God is.
Mm-hmm.
And how good my parents were to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when, like, my mother, she was always trying to find ways to connect with me, and it's little things, right? So, like, when we were growing up, she was teaching us how to clean up and stuff. She, take out the trash, vacuum the floor, sweep the floor, all these different things. Those are ways of connection, and a lot of people don't realize that you're learning the skill and you're connecting with the person that you're, calling mom and dad. So, like, there are many ways, but if you don't think about those ways, if you're not actively trying to connect, it's just the connection is just going to go further and further away where, you know, it's going to be contentious, in the house.
Yep. I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Another thing that adoptive parents can do is celebrate progress and not perfection.
Hmm.
Definitely have to celebrate the small wins. You have to be able to acknowledge that, because it does build trust. It builds emotional stability within the adoptee who already feels like they're not enough or may already feel little inside. And it lets them know that you are paying attention. You're paying attention to not only the behavior, the quote unquote bad behavior, but you're also paying attention to, again, the progressive behavior, and not taking that for granted. Another thing is, you can't take rejection personally. And I think that's a big one within the adoption community, because you want your children to love you. You want them to connect. You want it to be all rosy and lovey-dovey. And there will be times where your adoptee may push you away. There may be times where your adoptee is not connecting. There may be times where they want to be left alone. They may say hurtful things. And a lot of times the adoptees will do that, not necessarily to test you, but to see that if it gets tough, will you still be there? Will you hold on to me? Y'all know I always say, will you love me anyway? Like, will you love me anyway? Right? Like, will you love me anyway? And so in those instances, again, I would say give your adoptee space, but always revisit that, revisit it. What you is your space because you need space, or is your space because you have something on your mind and you need me to hold space for you right now? Because I don't mind doing that. I have nothing to do. I've cleared my schedule. What's up? You want to go out for lunch? You want to go bowling? Like, what can you do? What activity can you do where you can get on the same comfort level while doing an activity, but have casual conversation about what's going on in their heart and mind? Again, like you said, you put it perfectly. Adoptive parents have to have a creative, progressive mind. I think that is perfectly stated. They have to have a creative, progressive mind, because you will feel that everything you're doing or anything you're doing is just not working. And it's not that it's not working, is that you are trying to rely on your own knowledge, your own power to be able to get through something that you need a village for, that you may need professionals for, that you may need a support group for. And it doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you strong for wanting to include yourself and building a connection with your adoptee. It doesn't make you weak whatsoever. I know a lot of us come from or were adopted to baby boomers who are like, no, I got this. I don't need no help. I work and grind for mine. Can't nobody tell me nothing. But adoptees can tell you a lot. And actually, that's what you have to rely on, what they're telling you, and the behaviors. And I think that a lot of adoptive parents don't think it's that simple. And it is really that simple. You have the answers right within your adoptee. And the patience of allowing the adoptee to give you those answers or to reveal those answers is probably the hardest part of parenting, because in your mind, it should be happening by now. We should be able to connect by now. They shouldn't still be acting out in school. They should be we went to a couple of therapy sessions. Why isn't it working? And again, it's a journey. It's not, in 6 months, this behavior is going to go away. It may go away if you are consistently showing up and being that safe parent and, having the conversations and celebrating the wins and doing all the things that we discuss. But if you're not, you can't, what you put in is what you're going to get out.
Yeah. And, some people, they might, it's like I was explaining about the internet, when the internet goes out, like you have to have like in your mind things that happen, like how are you going to respond? Like what is going to be your response, right? Like, so if I eat some ice cream and I throw it in the air, like, what would be your response? Like what would you yell at me? Would you laugh? Would you sit down and throw ice cream in the air too? Like it's ways to respond, but the people that actually respond negatively are not really open minded about, connecting, because just because somebody does something, that doesn't mean that, they have to respond in a negative way. Like they could just be like, oh, you know, maybe he think it's playtime. And then you just have to explain, or sitting down eating, it's not playtime.
Mm-hmm.
It's time to eat, and actually, eat whatever we're eating and get up from the table, and then it can be playtime. So those are scenarios that I think they have to think about when they're parenting, and even when you go outside. And outside is even more important because, kids always want to run out in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm tell you, that was the first thing when we went outside. It was like you don't run to the curb. You stay, you know, within length of the front porch so we can see you. Um, and I never went towards the street
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that's what they told me, and that's what I did. But there are learning lessons every step of the way when you're actually growing up. There's things you learn in certain parts of the house. Like I'm pretty sure you probably had places where you couldn't eat. And like when I was growing up, we couldn't really eat in the living room. Like it was either in the dining room or in the kitchen. So there are certain things um, that is put in place is structure and is showing you how to actually behave in certain parts of the house. Um, and those are things that I think everybody needs to learn. But it's a skill, like you said, it's a skill to teach those things at the appropriate time.
Yeah. Like D-Man Entertainment says, children and adults need
Hmm.
structure. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I needed structure when I was adopted. I definitely needed structure. And there's nothing wrong with structure. There's nothing wrong with uh, discipline and structure.
Hmm.
However, like I said before, I needed more than structure as well. I needed, that emotional stability because I was in a few foster homes and then adopted. And
Hmm.
so yes, you can give a child structure, but you also have to identify that there was a trauma there,
Hmm.
that there was a loss there, and given someone structure who has, that's like saying someone who has lost a family member, right? And they're going through loss and they're going through grief and they didn't make their bed today. And you're like, what you doing? Go make your bed. I don't care what's going on with you. Go make your bed. You need to make your bed because we make our bed in this house. And it's like, okay, the bed needs to be made. I can see it makes you upset that the bed isn't made. However, is there any space that you can hold for me because I am grieving? Maybe I didn't have the strength to make the bed today. Maybe I didn't have, the bandwidth to actually even get out of bed today, right?
Hmm.
So you have to be mindful when you are giving children structure. It's I, again, it's easier to give structure to probably a child, a baby, where they are growing and learning in that structure. When you're
Hmm.
adopted at 8, you go from one structure to another structure. And so that period of adjustment, depending on what the circumstances are, may be a long period of adjustment. And those things have to be taken into consideration. All right, guys. That's all I got for tonight. That's all I had for tonight. I wanted to go over these disorders, explain the difference, make those who are not aware of what they are aware of what they are, as well as give some tips and ways that adoptive parents can assist in the connection with their adoptees, and really just really be aware that bad behavior with an adoptee who have experienced separation, neglect, trauma,
Hmm.
those bad behaviors are not just bad behaviors. They have roots that you need to address. They have roots that you have to be mindful of. And so I hope that you guys have learned something, because like I said, I didn't know what RAD was. I had not
Really?
heard of RAD. CPTSD, yes. RAD, no. And I can see why it's controversial in the community, because things that happen to us now puts a label on our back, and we're diagnosed, and then 5 and under, it's like, geez, can they live a good 10 years? Like, you know what I mean? But because of the severe neglect, severe abuse, they should be getting the mental help without being labeled. But playing devil's advocate, I think, I, I guess you have to name everything, but I don't think you have to claim it as a diagnosis.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't know about either one, to be honest. They don't, and I don't know how long this has been around, but like they don't teach you this stuff when you're growing up, or they don't, um, you know, parents don't talk about stuff like this, and they obviously don't want to talk about it because it would make them feel uncomfortable, right? Like it would make them actually have to dig and investigate what this actually is and how it impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really, they should, like, especially if you're going to adopt, doesn't really matter what age. I think you really need to understand what people are going through, no matter, what that is. Um, I definitely enjoyed it. I mean, obviously, there's always something to learn. We don't know it all, and that's what we're here to learn.
Yeah, I was excited to do this show because I'm like, I wonder if other people know about this. Again, we see the behaviors of those former foster youth and adoptees, and you don't necessarily know what to name it. You don't know the triggers. You don't know. You just know it's happening, right? You
Hmm.
just know that these are the reactions and responses and behaviors that you are receiving from an adoptee or a former foster youth, but you don't necessarily understand the impact that it is having on children. So much so that they're diagnosing children with this disorder because of something that happened to them, which shows you how dramatic or traumatic, excuse me, the impact of the neglect or the abuse was on a child who chooses not to connect with anyone. Like, to choose not to connect with anyone is very traumatic. Um, and honestly, having formed that connection and it being injured is traumatic as well, right? And so, we need to know of these things so again we can be better. That's the only initiative here, is to be better. It's not to be perfect. It's not to go in thinking that we know everything, because we
Hmm.
don't. We welcome everyone to the conversation, but I wanted to bring this to the platform tonight to spread awareness, and for those who were not aware to become aware. So
Amen.
hope you guys enjoyed it. That is it for this evening. Coach Chelsea said it was great, y'all. Very informative as always. I definitely enjoy being here. Well, thank you. Thank you. We enjoy having you. Also said that something people don't think of with trauma/depression. It can be a battle to complete daily tasks and even care for yourself. And yes, when these things go unaddressed, again, that daily task can become a battle.
Hmm.
So that's why we always encourage those um, individuals to say the uncomfortable things out loud, like free yourself, right? Just so you can make your bed in the morning, just so you can wash your ass, just so you can put on clothes, like, you know what I mean? Say it, yell it, go to a field and yell it, or write it down before you can say it. Before you can be verbal, at least write it down, right? Because it's only going to free you. It's gonna be like a burden lifted off of you. And get yourself involved with those like us who have platforms where we're able to spread awareness, advocate, and even educate ourselves. We don't know everything. We're going through this journey just like everybody else is. And so, like I said, I welcome all voices because all voices are needed in this space, but adoptees' voices should be, the voices that are listened to, so there's better understanding. So
I agree. Amen.
all right, guys, we're going to get up out of here. Join us tomorrow. We'll be here 9 p.m. Eastern with the men on the men's forum. But until then, do not get tired of saying the uncomfortable things out loud. Have a great evening.
Have a good one.